So let's get started with our unwrap. And there is one thing that we need before we start. Go over here to this website and download text tools. It's a MCP file. It's safe to download. Don't worry about it. And then I'm going to show you how we install that. So essentially all you have to do is drag this file that we just downloaded here into the viewport and then just hit that quick install button. So now all that's left to do is we want to add text tools to our toolbar there on top. Let's go to customize and customize user interface. And I just want to demonstrate you something that might otherwise be confusing. So if we go here to the category where it says text tools, you will find that you can't drag this to the toolbar like it is suggested there on that window from the installation. So what we have to do instead is go over here to toolbars, and then in the category we find text tools once again, and now we can drag it here to our top bar, and the next time you will launch 3D Max, it will be there. So as the next thing, remember our symmetry modifier stack only mirrors on the x-axis. The one here with the Z we're gonna leave deactivated and just collapse the whole stack. So here under modifiers you can find the unwrap editor if you don't have it yet. Let's bring it up, click on open UV editor, and let's configure it for a moment. You can toggle here the checker pattern in the background. Under options, I want to have always bring up the edit window, and then we save the current settings and collapse all. And now if we launch the unwrap editor, we don't have to confirm it with this extra click, which is unnecessary. And actually there's one more thing. Now that we look at these lines, they are quite thick, like the name suggests. I want to switch that to thin. Then we have to save it once more here, save current settings. And that time it will remember that for the next time we bring up our UV editor. For now, I'm gonna focus here on our sword, on the blade part, and in particular on these elements that we were working on. We have ignore backfacing on by default. I just turned it off. And I want to save this also as settings so that next time we come in, it is also off. And that way, if we draw a selection like this here, it will also select the polygons on the other side. So let me just toggle here with our wireframe mode, and while we press Control, we can add further polygons here to our selection, same as if we are outside of the UV editor. And now we have this selection here, and I'm gonna scroll down here and go over to quick planar map. And essentially right now I'm not concerned about how we unfold it. Let's just make some basic unwrap for our individual pieces, and then later we're gonna see how we best fold it out. I'm gonna continue here with these other details. Grow the selection, and now these guys we can also quick planar and put them out of the way. So let's see where we strike next. You can see we have our color selection here. So I'm gonna go over here to the left orthographic view, and I just want to be here in the wireframe view, F3, to make sure I'm not selecting anything there that shouldn't be selected. Essentially everything that is green we're gonna select now. And I'm just gonna jump into our isolation mode so that we don't have these horns in the way. And let's get out of the wireframe mode so that we see what actually is green here. And this is what we want to select. So pressing Control and making a selection will also add it on the other side. So let's just make sure we got it all selected here, what is green. And then let's also quick planar map it. And once again, we pull it out of the way. And now let's also do these eyeballs here individually. I'm gonna select these 4 polygons on both sides and then grow the selection. And that way we don't have to do so much clicking. Otherwise we can also select them individually. And once again, quick planar, because these eyeball sockets, we want them to be their own UV island. And the same goes here for that thing. Let's also quick planar map this and put it out of the way. And like I said before, it's good that we have this color coded, because in general we can just take most of it and use it as its individual UV island, such as this piece here. Let's also quick planar that. And then let's carry on here with the inside of the mouth. I'm gonna go over here to our left orthographic view and then once again draw selections for everything that shows up as blue here. And that's pretty much it. So quick planar. Oh, I had the wrong thing selected there. Let me just undo this. So now this is also pushed out of the way. So as the next thing, let's open up our text tools. And I just want to show you that there are some tiny menu bars, for example here under tools, that has some very important features. But here we want to make sure that dock next to UV editor is enabled, where it says setup. So here where it says check, we're gonna click it 2 times to get this checker pattern on here. I like this one the most. So let's make a selection here for everything that we have in this UV window that we haven't unwrapped yet and pushed to the side. And that is essentially the rest of the sword here for this part of the model. And let's quick planar it so that we don't have this messed up UV layout here, but we actually see our wireframe for the sword also here in the UV editor. So now we're gonna draw a selection here for this part of the blade. Let's also add these polygons. And we're gonna quick planar that, and this is gonna be 1 UV island. I'm not gonna add the parts on top of it, because then the blade part would fill up too much space in our texture, and that's why we have to split it up that way. Now I'm gonna select this snake part that we have here. And for that, let's go over here and put that select by element mode on. And actually that still didn't work. There's another one, it's a bit confusing, this one down here. And now we just have to draw over it and it will select the whole part. And for now we just want to push it out of the way. So now let's see what else we have left here. So this is our active selection here. And I want to get out of this select by element mode that we have here enabled on the right side. Let me just put it to wireframe mode. And then let's press Alt and deselect these polygons here that basically go under leather straps. So now the rest of the selection, I'm going to right click it and break it. And that way we have this element here as one piece. And now we have all the elements that we need pretty much. And I'm gonna say rescale elements. So now you can see if you zoom in that the checker pattern all has the same size. And that becomes more important later. I just want to make it so that visually it's a bit nicer here to look at. But we still have a bit more work left on it to do here with some more UV islands that we can do individually here. So I'm gonna select these polygons here, and actually the ones here on top, I'm gonna deselect them. I only wanna have these ones here where we have this angle. I'm also gonna add these 2 polygons there at the front. and then basically deselect this one and have this here as one UV island. And let me just zoom in. That looks about right. And then let's just make the same selection here on that other side. Because this part of the sword, I don't want to share the texture. So we have some individual scratches on it later on, and it's not perfectly mirrored. So now we have exactly the same UV islands. Don't forget these 2 polygons that I just added there at the front. And let's also quick planar it and push it out of the way here. And then also I'm just seeing that this edge flow is not very nice. So I'm gonna right click and collapse our UV editor. Close the text tools for the moment. Go over here to our edge mode and select these 4 edges, and then the same edges here on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and actually that was wrong. Let's deselect this one here at the front and here at the back. This is the selection on both sides. And now let's bring up our high poly just for a moment so that we see our edge flow on the high poly. And with that selection still active on the low poly, I'm gonna align it on the Z axis here. And let's just take a quick look at it. I want to go over here to our Z move tool and push it up on the Z axis. I mean, not our Z move tool, but our move tool. So this is the good thing about being flexible here. We can always jump in and out of our UV editor. And now we're just gonna jump back in here. And everything is still where we left it. So now let's go back here to this region that we were just fixing with the alignment. And let's just make a selection here for these parts. I like to split that up as individual UV islands where we have these borders so that the normal map doesn't have to stretch too much around it. Usually everything that is sort of like a 90-degree angle is good to unwrap individually. And here on the other side, we're gonna select exactly the same polygons. So now with this selection, we're gonna hit the quick planar button once again. And as always, just drag it up here. We're gonna unfold it all later. For now, we're only concerned to have the UV islands here in place. And let's make another UV island here for this part. And I'm gonna do the same one over here. Remember to press Ctrl just to make a multiple polygon selection here. And now with this one, same thing, quick planar and out of the way. And we have some more parts here on the sword that we want to have individual UV islands for. Let's take this into isolation mode so that we see the inside here of the blade part. And we're just going to select these polygons here. As always, really. And with this selection here, same thing. Let's unwrap it here with a quick planar. And then let's just make a new selection here for the other side. And then just repeat the thing with our quick planar. And that way we have these two UV islands here also unwrapped. And then this part here, let's also unwrap it. And then let's take a look where we can do some more unwrapping. And now on a second thought, I think we should unwrap a part of this here also as individual UV islands. That way we won't have any trouble later when we bake the normal map. Because once again, this area here that we are selecting is also on a pretty harsh angle there. And anything that is close to 90 degrees, it often makes sense to have it as an individual UV island. So before we are unwrapping this ram skull, I see some issues here where we have some geometry that is not triangulated in the best way. Like for example, here we have a bit of a problem where the triangulation is not really clear. And for that, I'm gonna collapse our unwrap editor here on the low poly. And we're gonna go over here to vertex mode and select this particular vertex and then draw a selection over it and also over this one. So now we have these as 4 vertex points, and if we connect them, it will do the same thing on the other side as well. So now let's draw a selection here for these vertex points. And once again, I'm going over here to left orthographic view. Let me zoom back in and then select these 2 points. So make sure you have 4 vertices there. And we're gonna connect it also. So now we have some triangulation there in place. Otherwise, it might be looking strange later on when the engine interprets where the triangulation is supposed to be. That's why in this case it's better to put these edges into the place, and that way there's no way it can interpret it differently. Let me bring up our high poly here in the Scene Explorer, and I want to do a bit more extra optimizing work here on these parts. So I'm going to select these 2 edges and also here on the other side. And then I'm going to use our chamfer dialog here. Bring this down a bit here. 0.4, that should work. Because I didn't like how this was basically a triangle there, and it's better to have an extra set of edge loops. And now with the target weld, we can connect these points here. And this will make for a nicer low poly part there without these triangles and all quads. Let's also select these 2 points here, or I should say 4 points, and connect them. And don't worry that the UV map looks broken there. We haven't even unwrapped it yet. Let's also go over here to these points and push them down on the Z-axis. Same for this one here. And now we have this nose cleaned up and it's better looking as before. So we can go back here to our unwrap editor. So now it's time to use our quick peel. I'm gonna select all our elements and I wanna deselect these 2 options here and also save it as current settings. Now let's press quick peel, and that made sure that everything here is perfectly stretched out now. And before we do further unwrapping, let's just get out of the unwrap editor. Let's collapse it, switch over to our vertex mode, and I want to have a bit of a better edge flow here. So once again, I'm going into the left orthographic view, and then I'm gonna select these 2 edges, which means that we have it also selected on the other side. Go to our move tool and just move that up a bit here on the Y-axis. And I want to do the same thing here on these 4 vertex points. Once again, that means we also have it selected on the other side. and then we just push it up a bit on the z-axis. Let's just take a quick look with our high poly on here, and let's also push that further up a bit here. And then these points here, I want to also drag them up a bit on the x-axis with edge constraint on. And unfortunately, I'm voice narrating this tutorial. I forgot to do the same thing on the other side. So don't even bother with it, or just go into the left orthographic view and select these 4 points and then push them up on the z-axis. It's really just about the edge flow. It doesn't make a big difference. So for now, I'm going to go back into our unwrap editor here, and we can carry on here with our unwrapping. So let's jump over here to the left orthographic view and unwrap that nose. I'm going to select these polygons here and then go over here to our quick planar and then also put it out of the way. And now let's select these polygons that we have down here. And I want that to be an individual UV island, but let's select a few more polygons into that selection. So once again, left orthographic view, that means we're also selecting everything on the other side, as long as we draw a selection with this draw selection rectangle. Let's make sure we have it on both sides and then do the quick planar. Looks like a V. I'm gonna also push it up here, and now let's do the quick peel on it again. And that means that everything is perfectly unfolded. I'm also gonna use the rescale elements. And as you can see, the checker patterns are now of the same size, and everything looks like it's done here for that part pretty much. And I just want to explain these features a bit more that we have here in 3D Max in the Unwrap editor. So with these parts selected, if we click on rescale elements, it means that all these UV islands are gonna be of the same size as it should be, and quick peel will entirely relax them. Quick peel is the perfect solution to stretch out our UV islands, and then we have this pack custom button. Let's press it, and what happens is that it fits everything here into our UV square, which is gonna be our later texture. But for now, we're not concerned about that. Let's do some more unwrapping here. I forgot this part here. I'm gonna select these 4 polygons, grow the selection, and then with this element here, let's also use our quick planar map and push it up here. The whole thing with the rescale elements and all that, this is going to be more interesting later once we puzzle everything together on the UV sheet. Right now we're still busy just unwrapping. And earlier we were working on these tooth here, or these teeth, plural. And so far we haven't actually broken them up yet. So you can see how the checker pattern is very stretched out, and it shouldn't be that way. Let me put the element mode on and select them. Let me see where the other one is. It's up there. Let's also select this one. And then let me just click that pack custom button so that it lands here in our canvas. And now what we want to do is split it up so that the UV checker pattern is unfolded correctly. And in order to do that, we're going to switch over to our edge mode here in the UV editor. And then we define where we want that seam to split, basically. So let's take this edge mode here, and I'm gonna have it here on these 3 edges, and then here on the other side on the same position. And then let us also do that on the other side here. We just zoom in, and I'm gonna have it here on these edges. So 1, 2, 3, 4 on this one. The other one only had 3 edges. And now we have this selection here. We're gonna right click and then we say break. So now if we select these polygons here, or these UV islands, we can then use our peel mode over here, the quick peel. And now you can see how the checker pattern looks much better as it was before. So that's basically how we unfold this. And then we can just push it out of the way. And when I look into the blade part here on the inside, I don't like how we have these edges there that don't really do anything. They only add to our poly count. So let's optimize that here. I'm going to use the target weld after we collapsed our UV editor. And also over here we have these 3 edges that don't really do anything. So I'm going to go over here and use target weld to optimize that. And now you see there is a bit of this stretching, but that's all right. We're just gonna add our unwrap editor here on top of it again. And now let's just select everything and use the quick peel again, and you will see how these checker patterns are now perfectly straight. I was just using the rescale elements on it so that everything has the same size. But like I said, that is gonna be more interesting once we get to the actual puzzling later on, when we put everything into our UV layout. Right now we're still only concerned with the unwrapping. So I'm gonna collapse this. This is looking good so far. We have all of these pieces here unwrapped. And now we still have some other pieces here. I'm gonna select the whole sword. That means we have 5 objects, and then with Alt, I'm gonna deselect the sword or the body of the sword. So that leaves us with these 4 objects here. The tooth, the horn, the leather straps, and the sphere. So let's take our leather straps and add our unwrap editor back on. And I want to go over here to our polygon mode and make a selection like this one here, which automatically also selects the bottom of it, but not these parts here on the side. And that's perfect. That's just what we want, because this is where our UV islands are gonna be. So we have the inside and the outside part, and then we have these parts here. Let's also quick planar it. And essentially this is already the leather straps here. So then we're going to also add our checker pattern on it here with text tools, and then we can collapse it and carry on with the next one. And that would be our horn. So let's add the unwrap editor back on it, and also our checker pattern. So I'm gonna click this twice. Sometimes it takes a moment to load, but now let's just give the whole thing a quick planar here. And then we define where we want to have our borders. And I want to have these parts here as an individual UV island. So I'm gonna quick planar that, push it to the top. And now on this selection here, the rest of it, I'm gonna hide our UV seam at the bottom. So when you look at it here from the front, you won't see it as obviously. So that's why you want to go over here to our edge mode, and then we add this border right here. Let's make sure it's one straight line. I'm just gonna toggle here with our wireframe mode to see more. And now with this selection here on these edges, we're gonna right click and say break, which will split the UV there. And now we can select these UV islands and give it the quick planar. And let's just hit that rescale element button. I just sometimes like to do that so that it looks nice when you look at it while you're still unwrapping, even though it's not really necessary until we actually puzzle everything together. But just so in case you wonder if it's required or not. So let's carry on with the next piece then. We have the leather strap and the horn. And now let's take both of these elements here into isolation view, or on a second thought, only the sphere, and let's collapse our symmetry modifier that was still on there. So now let's go back here with both objects, the tooth and the sphere, and let's add our unwrap editor. Let's jump over here to our polygon mode, and I'm just gonna select everything and give it a quick planar so that we already have it here in our UV canvas. And let's add our checker pattern on top of it. And now here in the top perspective, I'm gonna add these 3 stripes here as seen from the top. And I want to do the same thing on the other side and then give it a quick planar. I wanted to have the sphere here basically as one unique object, so in case that we have scratches on it, that it doesn't look too repetitive or tiling. And now I'm just gonna unwrap here these tips, and this piece here is then also one UV island, and in that case I'm just gonna select half of it, and then the other half is gonna be its own UV island. So let's just push that out of the way here. And now what we're still missing is some division there on these stripes. But before we do that, let's just go over here to these tooth. And actually let me collapse the unwrap editor and select it individually, just so that we don't have anything else in the way. So now let's select it and give it our usual quick planar here. And now we also have to split it up. So I'm just gonna select that tip here and have this as an individual UV island. And then here on the rest of the tooth, let's switch over to the edge mode and then have the seam here at the back of the tooth where basically you will barely ever see that there's the split. And even if you would somehow see it, it would barely be recognizable. But overall, it's better to hide the seams always, if possible, where it can't be seen. So now we select these islands and give it our usual quick planar here. Sorry, the quick peel is what I was referring to. And let me just take a quick look here. Let's scale it down after we use the rescale elements just to see how it looks like. And that will do here for the tooth. I'm gonna collapse our UV editor. Let me jump back here to the sphere, because you can see how the UV pattern here is not perfect yet. That's because we haven't used the quick peel on it yet. So now we have, let me just rescale the elements here so that everything is of one size. So now we have everything unwrapped. Let's collapse the sphere here, the unwrap editor. And what we want to do is select all our objects that we have here. The main body of the sword, the leather straps, the sphere, the tooth, and the horn. And let's add our unwrap editor here on top of it. I'm gonna switch over here to our polygon mode, select everything. And now here you see we have the selection active. I'm gonna give it one more quick peel here on everything. Scroll down and click on the Pack Custom button, which automatically packs it into our UV layout. So technically, we could say this is our texture now, but obviously this looks completely unusable. Everything is bent and not perfectly aligned. So now we have to do some more work here on it. I'm going to go over to our element mode so I can select one UV island with just one click. And we're going to start with that one here. And in particular, what I want to do is split that up in a different way as we have it, because somehow this makes problems here with this part at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is take that selection and use our Alt key to deselect everything here aside from these polygons that we leave on it. So this here I want to break up and have it basically as its own UV island. Right click and break. And then let's just select this everything here once more and give it another quick peel. And also here the rescale and the pack button. And now this is better as before. We don't have this problem where the UV island was completely out of place and intersecting into each other, the polygons. And now what we want to do is focus on straightening these individual UV islands. So I'm going to select here the center edge and hit that align button on the text tools. Another cool feature here on the text tools, even though it's also integrated into the regular unwrapping tools that 3D Max comes with, but usually I just end up using the text tools. I guess I just really like text tools and I'm used to it. So basically what we want to do is just making sure it's sort of vertically or horizontally aligned, these individual UV islands. And it doesn't really matter if it's perfectly straightened out on every edge or not, because we're working on a very organic object here and we can't expect everything to be perfectly straight. So it's okay to have not every edge 100% aligned on the vertical or horizontal axis. And essentially we're just gonna grabbing the center lines and then hit the align button. And somehow I'm not sure why this one didn't work. Let me just collapse this. The reason is that we have all these 5 objects here selected together and we want to collapse them down to one, or else this align tool sometimes doesn't work. Let me convert the mesh to an editable poly here. That happens when we collapse something. It will make it a mesh, so we have to collapse it down to a poly. And now we're back here with our UV editor, and we can actually use these UV islands here and work on them and essentially align them. So this one here, and then we have this piece, which I think is part of the snake. I think that's the mouth of the snake. Then we got these pieces here. Let's also align them. And essentially one by one, we're going here through our UV islands and making sure they are aligned. We got this piece here. Sometimes it's kind of useful to zoom in and see which piece we're actually dealing with. In this case here, it's part of the center element of the sword. And let's also align it. And speaking of alignment, let's double click this edge here on the leather strap, which will select the whole edge loop. And then here we can loop it to all sides, and then pressing the mouse button down on this one gives us the vertical align option for all the edges. So now we have all these, and we're gonna do the same thing here for the horizontal ones, just in the reverse order. And then let's do the same thing over here. Let's press down that mouse button so we get to the second option, and that way we have all these loops here and we can align them here. And we carry on here with this V-shaped UV island. Let's also align it. And same thing here. Let's select the edges in the center, and then it will automatically align it so that it points to either vertical or horizontal direction, whatever is the closest. And that's really all we want to do, so that when we will pack everything together, it's not all over the place. So let me select this piece here and see where it is. It's this one here, and I actually want to straighten it, same as this other piece on the other side. So let's push it over here and let's straighten elements and relax it. So now I'm just gonna give that here a 45-degree rotation. And what I want to do is double click these edges so we have a vertical selection, loop it over, and then use this tool that we were just using before. Do the same thing here. And that's good enough. At least it's not all curvy, which will result in space on our texture map that we can use better if we completely straighten it. If everything is all curvy, then it will result in less texture space for us once we pack it. That's why it makes sense to straighten out some pieces. And speaking of doing that, I'm gonna select these edges and then make use again of this feature that we were just using before. And here I'm just gonna select these edges individually and also align them horizontally, which will just look better on our normal map later on as well and result in a nicer bake. And here let's just grab these edges and drag it out a bit to the right side so that it's the same as on the left side. And here let's also align it. And let's see what other pieces we have left. Let me select the blade part that we have here, these edges, and I'm just gonna also use this feature on it. And now what I want to do is go over to our vertex mode, select these 3 vertex points here on both sides, go to freeform mode and press Shift, which will result in a uniform scale here a little bit to the sides so that this is better curved. I'm just gonna go ahead here with these UV islands and also align them. And let's see what else we got. I mean, you could argue that these UV islands here don't really need to be aligned, but I prefer to have it pointing up either vertically or horizontally. And this is what we're doing here at the moment to make sure that these elements are aligned. And let's take a look. I'm gonna go over here to our element mode, select this island that we have, and you can see how there is some issue with, even if we press the peel button, with the right side being shorter than the left, which shouldn't be the case. So what I'm gonna do is go over here to our top view, collapse what we got, and now if we go over here to our polygon mode, the selection will still be active. So now what I want to do is press Alt and deselect this part, and that part then there, we're going to delete it, the one that's still left. So now we jump back here into the UV editor, select this element, collapse our UV editor again, go over to polygon mode, and then detach it as a clone. So here we go. Let's get out of the polygon mode into the selection mode. And with that selection, we're just gonna mirror it over. Make sure it says no clone, and we wanna mirror it on the x-axis. And now we can go over here to that piece and attach it onto the body. So now let's bring up the unwrap editor again. And this piece is now basically exactly a clone of the other one. And what we want to do with that is go over here to the edge mode, double click on these lines here, and then press Ctrl here at the bottom to also get these edges. And then I want to straighten them here like that, so that they are vertically aligned. Same here. And now we can stitch it. So I'm going to go over here to our vertex mode, select the whole element, make sure to have this little magnet icon there enabled in the corner right, and then we snap it here onto the other UV island and select all of them, I mean the both of them, and now right click and weld selected. And the line in the center is still green, which means it didn't weld. And that's because I forgot to actually weld it physically here on the 3D model. So let's make a selection here on these parts and bring up the weld dialog 0.001 so that we don't weld anything that shouldn't be welded. That's why I like to put it on the smallest margin. And now we can go back here onto that object, make a selection here on these points, right click and weld select it. And I'm not sure why this is still green here. That should actually be white. That means there's still some issue. And I'm trying to find the source of that. This here is not welded yet. So let's see which point that is. This is the point that we see here. Right click weld select, it doesn't do it. So I think I have to first of all Ctrl Z, jump out of the unwrap editor once more, and let's go to vertex mode. And for some reason these are still two vertices here. I forgot to weld them when I made that selection. So now we actually have it all welded. The selection that I made earlier was not reaching to these points. So now we can right click it in polygon mode and weld it. Doesn't matter if it's polygon mode or vertex, it will just weld it then. So now let us select all our pieces here. We want to rescale elements and then pack custom. And that will put everything here into our UV layout. So essentially we could already bake our textures onto that. However, you see we have these open spaces and I just want to manually rearrange some of these UV shells. So let's go here into our element mode, and I'm just gonna start taking these islands that we have and fill it all out a bit more efficiently. Efficiency is the word that comes to mind when it comes to the unwrapping. We don't want to waste too much space. I mean, we can't avoid not to have some spaces that won't be filled out entirely, but we can always try to make a better job. And what I want to do is just pack everything more efficiently. Taking these pieces here, and where I see some open spaces, we want to fill it out. And that way later we can grab everything and scale it all up a bit because of the space that will now be opened on the bottom and on the right side. Basically, that's the current goal, and you will see it once we get to it. For now, let's just see how we can position these pieces better. This here doesn't work. Let's see about that piece here. And this piece, I want to go back to our edge mode and bring up our text tools once more. Select that edge and align it. And now let me get back here to polygon mode and push that up here. And let's select this one. Oh, Control Z. I wasn't back in our element mode. Element mode makes it easier when we puzzle everything together here, where we just have to click on a UV island and it will then select everything, the whole selection. So that makes it easier then for us to do this puzzle game that we're currently doing here. And let me see how we can arrange this here better. Maybe this piece can be up there, and this piece we can put next to it. And now let's see about these smaller pieces here. As you can see, we also should always make sure that there is some space in between the UV islands. They shouldn't be too close by each other. And of course, they should never intersect. This is the most important thing. Always double check that nothing is intersecting, or else you will get a messed up normal map because it will bake into each other basically. So if you ever see some weird stuff on your normal map, it might be worth checking your UV layout. And now we have this piece, and where do we fit that under? Some people really hate unwrapping. Personally, I always find it kind of entertaining. It's almost like a puzzle game to get the most space out of it. And it's always important to take your time with it. Don't rush it. So now let me select this piece here, deselect the other one, and get it out of this intersection that we had there. And now we have this piece here, which, where do we fit it? Let's put that piece here, and now we have the problem of this piece, which also needs to be fit somewhere. So let's just test it where it could be, where we then rearrange some other parts. So this piece here is the sphere. And what I'm gonna do is take these pieces that we had there. I want to mirror it vertically. I'm gonna rotate it here a bit. Right now it's still intersecting. That's why I'm gonna go here into our freeform mode. We might have to scale it a bit, but first let's see about that piece here. If we push it down, that means we are freeing up some space there. Now we have some intersection here, so let's fix that. And this piece here we can push to the right. And this piece fits in there. We don't have any intersection, even though it's quite close to the other UV island, but in that case it's okay. It's only these 2 points there where it's getting close, because it has a bit of this arch. So in that case, I don't mind it. Let's reposition that here as well. Push it a bit more to the left. And also over here I want to do that. And the same here. And you can see how now we have all this free space there on the left side and at the bottom. I'm just gonna use these pieces here to also fill them here into our empty spaces. This one fits great over here, and then I'm just gonna rotate this piece here and leave it there. So, and now these pieces, just gonna push them further up here. Same as this. And here we could rotate it a bit so that it doesn't intersect down there. And here let's just see how we can position that better. And then we have these pieces here which we can also push further up. And now you see how we have that empty space. Let's select everything and press Ctrl and then scale it up. And you will see how you have this selection bracket, this one here. It will show you exactly where it should be, so that you're not out of the UV space. And here in that case, let's see about that piece here. This is this tiny little cap from the tooth. I almost didn't see it because it's so small. That was intersecting there. So good thing we double checked. Let's just push this up here because that was kind of out of the UV space. And also here, let's just further push that up. And here it's better positioned over there. All right. And now let's select everything once more, and let's just make sure that nothing is out of the space. And in that case, we had this piece here, and I'm just gonna scale it a bit here to the left, pressing Shift, just so that we fit it better in there. And here, let's just zoom in on the borders. I'm gonna push it just a tiny bit to the right side, and now we have this piece once again. This one here is the troublemaker. So I'm just gonna select it and squeeze it a bit more. And let me take another look around. This piece here we can push more to the right side now, same as this. And we are almost done now. This is a way better looking UV map as the one that the auto packing was doing. And now we can collapse this. Actually, let's jump into the UV editor once more. And essentially, I want to unwrap this here in a different way, our tooth. So what I'm going to do is select this little cap here. And then let's see where the rest is of our unwrap. It's over here. So let's press Ctrl. That means we have everything now selected here on that tooth, together with that small cap. And then I'm gonna go over here to our quick planar. And where is it? It's over here. Quick planar map. So now we have this piece here. And essentially I just want to have one edge seam running through the whole thing without this cap that we used to have before. So let's go over here to the edge mode. And then I'm just gonna select the whole line here, starting here. Press Ctrl to select all of them. I'm just gonna toggle here with F3. And then we have this edge here. We can break it. Then go over here to our polygon selection and let's quick peel it. And now let's just scale it up. So let's scale it up here, and that way we don't have this extra edge seam where we used to have this cap, and that will result then in a nicer look when we bake it. So that's pretty much it here for our unwrap. However, that doesn't mean we're entirely done yet. We still have to copy the pieces into the right place that want to share the texture. So let's go over here with our element mode and let's detach this piece here, the leather straps. And I'm gonna call it leather underscore low. I don't want to have it as a clone. So I'm just gonna say okay to that. And now this piece here, I'm gonna go over here to our mirror mode and make a copy on the Z axis. And since the pivot was at 0 on Z, it comes in on the right place here. So let's just attach it. And now let's go over to element mode, select this copied part that we were just creating. And now comes the very important part where here, where it says V, we want to press 1 and hit enter so that by the power of 1, this thing jumps up here. And the reason is that otherwise, since this is supposed to share the texture, the normal map bake would get messed up. Now let's weld this here together in vertex mode. I'm gonna say 0.01 welding threshold so that we don't weld stuff that's not supposed to be welded. Now in the element mode here, I'm gonna detach the main body of the sword and I'm gonna call it sword underscore low. And now let's go here into our selection mode and do the same thing as before. Let's just make sure that the pivot is at 0 and that way we can copy it here on the Z axis. Say okay to that. And I'm just gonna bring up the unwrap editor. It already has everything selected, so now we just have to do the same thing here. V1 and press enter and then collapse. And then go back here to our upper part and attach the other part to it. And then let's zoom out and in vertex mode, select everything. And once again, we want to weld it. I'm gonna have a weld threshold of, let's just put 0.001 to make sure it's not welding anything that it shouldn't weld. And now we have these horns here that we need to copy 3 times. Let's start here on the x-axis, say okay to that. And I made a mistake, so I'm gonna delete that here. Let's delete it because I didn't detach it. And that means that I was also just cloning the sphere. So I'm just gonna go over here to the sphere and detach it. Sphere underscore low is what I'm gonna call it. And then let's also detach our tooth here. I'm gonna call it tooth underscore low. So now we can go back here, detach, and call it horn underscore low. And now let's go over here and mirror it as a copy on the x-axis, which puts it into the right place. And let's just bring it up here and also already copy it on the z-axis. And then one more time here on the x-axis. And that means that we have everything here in place. I'm gonna press Control on these copied horns, open up the unwrap editor, select it, and same thing, get it out of the way here by 1 and collapse it back. And now we got to do the same thing here for these tooth. So let's select it, double check for our pivot, bring up that dialog here, and on the x-axis we say okay to it. And let's bring it up again and do the z-axis. Also make a copy, and then on that selection bring it up again and copy it on the x-axis. So these here are our 3 copies, but I'm gonna go back here to the original one, the tooth underscore low, and attach these copies to it. Get out of the attach dialog, go over here to our selection and I only want to select the ones that we were just copying. Bring up our unwrap editor and same thing here. Press 1 and enter. I mean type 1 and enter. And here we have to do the same thing on these horns. Let's attach it to the original horn underscore low. Bring up our dialog here. Let me just double check. We already did that. So everything is fine on those horns. Now let's bring up our layer explorer. And I just want to double check that our naming conventions are one-to-one. There is this ZBrush underscore default group, which is empty. Sometimes in Macs there is some empty stuff. So I'm just going to delete that. Press delete button. And now let's compare our naming convention here with the high poly. And I see that this here, this piece is called band, where on the low poly we have it called leather. So I'm gonna also rename it to leather underscore high to make sure that our naming convention is one-to-one the same. And here on the sword, we want to call it sword underscore high on the high poly, so that it's the same as the low poly. Let's just compare the other ones. So the horn is the same as the horn underscore low, and the sphere is also the same, and so is the tooth. So now we have everything here in the same naming convention in the right order, so that Substance Painter will be able to pick up on it once we get to the baking part of our normal map and the other maps such as curvature. So I'm just gonna hide the low poly. I only want to have the high poly here, and there is something that we have to fix. It was actually my error. I shouldn't have deleted the other side of this side part here, this wing looking thing, because we need to have it on the other side as well. First of all, let me put that here to 0 on X, Y, and Z with a tiny arrow button and a right mouse button click. Let's get out of the effect pivot mode. And then I'm gonna go over here to our element mode, select this wing and detach it. So we gotta detach it so that we are able to grab it and mirror it over to the other side, because we need to have this geometry available there as well. So let's copy it here on the x-axis. Thanks to our pivot being in place, it will just perfectly fit over there. And then let's attach it so that we have this here as one element. Let's go over here to the sword underscore high and then attach these pieces back on. So as the next thing, let's get out of this attach mode, and we're going to export our high poly now. For that, we're going to select everything, make sure everything is selected here, export selected, and then let's navigate over to our substance folder, or at least that's what I like to call it, within our sword folder. And then we're gonna choose OBJ and call it sword underscore high, say save. And these are the settings. I didn't change any of it. It's the default settings. And I'm just gonna fast forward the export part here. That usually takes a bit longer. And now let's just hide the high poly and go over here to our low poly. And there is still something that I want to do before we export. First of all, let's bring up the material editor. And I'm just going to call it sword. Apply one material called sword. The color doesn't really matter, but we can change it here if we want to. So I'm just going to give it this light blue here for as long as we work on it. And before we export it, let me just close the material editor here. And now comes the part where we assign our smoothing groups to the low poly. Let's bring up text tools. Let's go over to where it says tools. And you want to say smoothing groups from UV shells. So that will create this modifier stack that we have to collapse. And then we go on with the next piece, repeat the same process. Smoothing groups from UV shells, and then we collapse it. And let's carry on here with the next piece in our Scene Explorer. Do the same command, collapse it, and so on. So now we have the big piece here. I'm just going to zoom in here so that you see the difference with the smoothing groups. You can toggle it with the added poly to see the difference. We just want to make sure these smoothing groups are applied to every UV shell, and that will guarantee a perfect normal map bake on the basis of how we unwrapped it. So last piece here, the tooth. Let me also do this here and collapse it. And now that means we have our low poly perfectly set up. So now with that selection active, we want to go over here to export selected, and we want to export it as an FBX. And we want to export it to the same folder where we have the high poly in. And I'm going to call it sword_low. Export as FBX. Save. And I'm just going to use the default settings that we have here. So this is the low poly model that we are going to use to bake our textures upon. So now let's right click and clone it as a copy. And let's create a new folder, which will automatically then put the active selection into this new folder. And we're going to call it for texturing. So let me close the sword_low poly that we were just exporting. And let's select the body of the sword, which is the sword_low part. Let's go over here to our move tool with W and press Shift to make a copy of it. So just a copy. And then we want to do the same thing here for the sphere and the horns, and also copy it over here to the other side. And essentially we're going to swap out the original low poly that we're baking upon with this version after we baked it. You will see that in the texturing part once we get to it. And that way we have these pieces isolated out, and we have easier access when it comes to drawing on them and seeing what we're up to. So now I'm just going to export it and call it sword_for_texturing. And I'll see you in the Substance Painter part.